Okay, this is an Edgeworth box, first bullet point, with production and specialization at A. And you're going to see PPFs that look like this, where you've got a box diagram, you've got two lines drawn. It says Joe's PPF, Bo's PPF, and you can see which ones they are. Okay, this next point I want to highlight is an important one. The diagram only provides partial information. And so to answer some of the questions, you're going to have to make some inferences or deduce certain things mathematically. So as an example, I might ask you what Bo's productivity is with respect to wine. Well, Bo's PPF intersects the wine axis, which is here, at a value of 120 units, gallons. Remember the units, it's gallons. So Bo's productivity in wine production is 120 gallons per hour, if that's the units that I describe in the model. All right, but what is Bo's productivity with respect to cheese? Well, the answer to that is it's wherever this intersects the cheese axis over here. But you don't have a value for that listed. But you should be able to figure out, if I'm asking you the question, exactly what that point would be from the mathematics that's present from the numbers that are presented on the diagram and from the mathematics. And that's going to mean figuring out what the slope of that line is and then inferring from that what this rise over run will be and what this distance will turn out to be. All right, and this is going to be characteristic of a lot of the problems you're going to see. So you're going to see some information, but you're not going to get all of the information. And this is exactly the kind of things I want you to be working on, trying to figure out, if I don't have all the information for this, how do I figure it out from the data and info that's presented to me? And this is actually going to be something that I think is going to be characteristic of a lot of your working lives. When you get into work, and you're working for an organization, be it a government organization or a private firm or an NGO, nonprofit organization, you're going to be presented with problems, and they're going to say, we need to figure this out. And they're going to set you forward and they're going to say, go out and figure this out. And when they do that, you're not going to sit back and say, well, where's the instruction book and where are all the practice problems the guy can work through and everything's going to be, answered for me there. Instead, you're going to go out there into the world and you're going to say, well, I've got this information, but I could use this information and I don't know about this. So I'm going to have to figure that out. And so you're going to have to kind of figure out from the available information what you need, how to figure out how to get what you need, and how to get answers to those questions. Now, the problems you're going to face in the real world are much more complicated than what I'm showing you here. But this is sort of a step in that direction. In the context of an economics model, understanding some basic principles, can you make some inferences from a diagram and figure out the things you need to figure out in order to get the answers correct? And that's the purpose of an exercise like this. And that's what I think you're learning and why these are useful skills, because they are going to have applicability. Nobody's going to give you this diagram in work and say, okay, figure out these things. But you might be faced with similar sorts of dilemmas, and you're going to have to figure out from the information you're given how to get to a particular conclusion. All right, let me give you one more example real quick. On this diagram, for example, you're not given what this value is measured from Bo's origin. Okay, but you can quickly figure it out because you've got these. This is 0 for Joe, and this is going to be 30 units, 60 units. The entire length is 120 units. So if this is 60 here, then that's got to be 60 over there. So if you need to have that value in order to answer a question, you can figure it out from the diagram. All right, and that's an example of something you might see in you will see in the problem sets. Here's another question. This is also Edgeworth box with production possibility frontiers presented. And here you can see that again, it's intersecting in the corner like it is before. This time we have indifference curves that are presented, and those may or may not be useful for different questions that might be asked. But this is a way in which we can sort of ask, I could ask you both questions about pure exchange, or I could ask you questions with incorporated. And you've got more information presented on this graph that might be useful to the questions that are going to be asked. Let me point out on this diagram, though, an important point. If they specialize at a point like A, their trading ratio, their terms of trade, is always going to be in between. Slope is going to be in between the slopes of their two PPFs. Sam, as an example, would never be willing to trade to a point like this. Notice that that would give Sam an increase in utility relative to point A, But note also that because of the production possibility frontier presented, he could get it even better by producing for himself at point B. So Sam would never be willing to move into this area here because he could produce better for himself. And likewise, John would never be willing to move into an area like this because he too can get further out from his production. He can produce that with his own capabilities. He would want to trade only to a point out this way. All right, and so that's a little bit of a difference in what is relevant areas in a diagram with production versus just a pure exchange model. Okay, lastly, let me just flash up this diagram real quick to illustrate that here we've got a PPF diagram where the intersection of the PPFs is in the middle. Now that corresponds to this diagram here. Where is it? There. Where they came to the market having produced what's best for themselves initially, not necessarily what's best after they can specialize in trade. So if you're presented with a diagram like this, where the intersection is in the middle, then you know that's the non-specialization point. They haven't moved to specialization yet. And then the question can ask you questions like, well, what would they specialize if they, if they were to specialize in their comparative advantage goods? What is their comparative advantage? You can figure that out again from the data that's represented up here on the diagram. Also remember, just as a pointer, that if this person has an origin down here and we're measuring upward, this 20 is measured from this 0. This 25 measured again from this 0. But this 40 is measured over from here. It's on this axis. So you've got 20, 40, and then I don't know what that number is. 15 here, it's on this axis. So therefore it's being measured from 0 that direction, not from this direction. All right, and that's how to read the diagram and to make sure you understand what all the numbers refer to.